book review of The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, presented to you by Aidan Troy.
The word selfish usually carries a strong negative meaning. It is often used to describe people who prioritize their own interests without regard for others. Because of this, the title, The Selfish Gene, can easily be misunderstood. Many readers initially assume that the book argues humans are naturally immoral, or that selfish behavior is biologically justified. However, Richard Dawkins uses the term selfish in a scientific and metaphorical way. The book is not a moral argument. It is an explanation of how evolution operates at its most fundamental level. The Selfish Gene was published in 1976 by Richard Dawkins, a British evolutionary biologist. At the time, evolutionary biology often focused on organisms, groups, or species as the main units of natural selection. Dawkins proposed a different perspective. He argued that genes rather than organisms are the primary units of selection. According to this view, evolution is best understood by examining how genes survive and replicate across generations. Genes are described as selfish because they behave as if their main objective is to make copies of themselves. This does not mean that genes possess consciousness or intention. Genes do not think, plan, or choose. The word selfish is used to describe the outcome of natural selection. Genes that are better at surviving and reproducing become more common over time, while genes that are less successful gradually disappear. From this gene-centered perspective, living organisms are described as survival machines constructed by genes. Bodies exist to protect genes and help them pass into future generations. Humans, animals, and plants are all temporary vehicles that carry genetic information. This idea challenges the traditional view that evolution is centered on individuals or species, but it provides a powerful framework for understanding biological behavior. One of the most important arguments in the selfish gene is that selfish genes do not necessarily result in selfish behavior. Many behaviors that appear generous, cooperative, or self-sacrificing can still be explained through gene-centered evolution, a central concept that explains that this is kin selection. Kin selection refers to the tendency of organisms to help relatives because relatives share many of the same genes. For example, parents share approximately half of their genes with their children, and siblings also share about half of their genes with each other. When a parent protects a child or when siblings cooperate, they are helping genes that are genetically similar to their own survive. From the perspective of genes, helping close relatives can be just as effective as helping oneself. This explains why strong family bonds and protective behaviors are so common in nature. Kin selection also explains behaviors observed in animals. Certain animals risk their lives to warn family members of approaching predators. Others share food or resources with relatives while refusing to help strangers. These behaviors appear unselfish at the level of the individual organisms, but they increase the chances that shared genes will survive. Altruism, therefore, does not contradict evolution. It emerges naturally from it. Beyond kinship, Dawkins also explores cooperation between unrelated individuals. Cooperation can evolve when individuals interact repeatedly over time. In situations where individuals encounter each other again and again, strategies based on trust, reciprocity, and fairness can be more successful than constant competition. Game theory models, such as the prisoner's dilemma, are used to demonstrate how cooperation can be stable and advantageous under certain conditions. This idea explains why humans form societies, create laws, and develop moral systems. Cooperation allows groups to function more effectively than individuals acting alone. Even though genes are described as selfish, the outcomes of evolution often involve complex social behaviors that benefit many individuals at once. These evolutionary ideas can be applied to modern human behavior and public figures. Donald Trump, for example, is often portrayed as a highly competitive and self-focused individual in both business and politics. His public persona emphasizes winning, dominance, and personal success. For example, he goes like, "We will see stuff nobody has ever done before. I always win." From a gene-centered evolutionary perspective, this behavior can be understood as one possible strategy within a competitive environment. And you might ask, did you input the Donald Trump voice? No, that is my voice. In short-term situations, aggressive self-interest can produce visible success. Competition can lead to wealth, power, and recognition. However, the selfish gene also helps explain why this strategy has limitations. In long-term systems such as governments, societies, and international relations, cooperation is essential. Trust, shared norms, and mutual restraint allow large groups of people to function together. When individuals consistently prioritize only their own interests, cooperation can break down. This breakdown can lead to conflict, instability, and resistance from others. Evolution does not reward selfishness in a simple or moral sense. It rewards strategies that work within specific environments. In many human systems, cooperative strategies outperform purely competitive ones over time. This example illustrates an important theme of the book. Evolution does not favor kindness or cruelty by default. It favors behaviors that succeed within a given context. Sometimes competition works, sometimes cooperation works better. The success of strategy depends on the structure of the environment and the nature of repeated interactions. Another important concept introduced in the book is the idea of memes. Memes are units of cultural transmission, similar to how genes are units of biological transmission. Memes include ideas, beliefs, customs, technologies, and values that spread from person to person through imitation or communication. Unlike genes, memes can spread and change extremely quickly. Memes allow human societies to evolve culturally at a much faster pace than biological evolution. Most systems, political ideologies, scientific knowledge, and social norms are all examples of mimetic evolution. This means that human behavior is shaped not only by genetic inheritance, but also by culture and learning. Memes can sometimes oppose genetic tendencies, further demonstrating that humans are not trapped by biology. Well, I'm using the word tendency too much, but don't worry, there's no alternative for that. Anyways, back to the book. The selfish gene presents a view of life that is both mechanistic and meaningful. It explains how complex behaviors can arise from simple evolutionary principles without reducing humans to machines without choice. By understanding how evolution works, humans gain insight into why certain instincts exist and how they can be managed or transformed. The book challenges readers to separate scientific explanation from moral judgment. It shows that understanding evolution does not weaken concepts such as responsibility, cooperation, or ethics. Instead, it provides a deeper foundation for understanding them. Knowledge of biology becomes a tool for reflection rather than an excuse for behavior. In conclusion, the selfish gene shows how selfish genes shape life and how humans can rise above them.